Hello, world. Welcome to the Speed Strength Show. I'm Braden.
I'm Tommy, and the weighted ab crunch machine is the Florida of exercise equipment.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad you took the time to figure out how to say that because that was gold. Yeah, I agree. Wholeheartedly. I
It,
don't,
I mean, it's a strange place to be, and old retired people love it. And that's
yeah,
have you
okay.
seen anyone else use it before? I haven't. In what few places I've been where there's a weighted, like the one where you're sitting and then you fold yourself forward against the loaded pad.
Yeah, and you
I don't
got
think
like
I've seen anyone under the age of 60 use that in my entire life.
no, maybe not. I don't know if I've seen that rendition of it. I think I've seen maybe one with, maybe. I feel like I've seen one that had like an armrest kind of thing that you're like pressing down into, like
Oh,
one on
that's a
like
unique
a
one.
like a jetpack or something. I could be wrong, but
Yeah, the ones I've seen are like you sit there and then there's a pad that like basically is designed to, I guess, sit against your sternum or
like
your,
a roller coaster harness.
yeah, well, it's like a bar that goes in front of you.
Okay.
And then you can adjust the height of the bar based on, I guess, how tall you sit.
Yeah.
And then you just stuff your sternum into that and then just press it forward. The worst piece of equipment I've ever seen.
Oh well. I mean, I don't know if that's fair because we did talk about uh I don't remember, was it the weightlifting? It was in the weightlifting one where we
I
said
know where you're going with this. As
there's
soon as
no
I
gooder.
said that, the back, I'm like, oh, he's going to counter with this. I know
Yeah.
what I'm getting into. Uh oh.
Well, if there's no good or bad exercises, there's no good or bad equipment, you know. Like if you want, so we talked about sit-ups being the worst exercise, but if you want a program for anterior core force production and low back mobility slash potentially pain, do sit-ups. And this is the exact same thing. Like you're just going to get so much flexion and compression and mobility. It's great. What else do you want?
Which do you think is worse for you?
Sit-ups or loaded.
Yeah. Or are these equally as bad? I mean, I feel like if you took biomechanical analysis of this, one of them's bound to be worse. That would be my guess.
I think this would be worse because I think there's a lot more compression because you have to overcome an external load as well.
That's my gut instinct. I just wasn't sure how it changes because you're in like a tall seated position versus
That's right.
horizontal, if that would affect the shearing force.
Well, yeah, I think the shearing force would be lower probably because you're not gonna. I don't think you'd get as much mobility as you would out of a setup.
No, so yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Like that would be an interesting study.
Yeah,
It really wouldn't serve any purpose because you shouldn't do either of those two things. But like I'd be curious to know which one is worse for you.
yeah. Have you ever tried to max out your seated weighted ab crunch?
No, I've never actually used it. There's been a few times where like I've walked by it and I'm like, what's the worst that could happen?
Just
Maybe I'll just
curious.
try it once just to see what it's like.
I
But then I
fe-
never can get myself to do it.
I feel like I maybe did try it once or twice when I was in a Movati when I was 19. I feel like maybe that happened, but I can't quite remember. I have seen some bodybuilders at my gym will do this. It's like a similar idea where you kneel in front of the cable machine and have like the rope attachment like down on, so you're holding it like just on the other side of your
Oh,
neck kind of thing, and they don't round but they pull down, and it is a core exercise, and they're trying to like actively hinge at the hips kind of thing, which I don't know, it's interesting to me because it's still like an isometric core thing, and then you're using your hip flexors as well. Is how I imagine that's going. If you're
yeah. You
keeping
wonder if the
neutral
movement even
spine,
matters.
yeah, like if you're doing
Like
it for
adding the hip
core,
hinge.
uh, I don't know.
Because like you
Like
said, you're still isometrically, you're still holding and bracing that position.
yeah, I mean, it could make a difference because there's like the forces are going to change as you're like you have to produce enough force not just to hold the position but to hold it and move. So,
Mhm.
I mean, maybe.
As like the
But I don't
weighted
know.
ab crunch machine is just straight resisted spinal flexion.
Yes.
I mean, I guess
Yeah, I
you could
don't.
do it isometrically.
You could do it isometrically, but I don't think you'd be able
You
to
could like
like
load it up and like I guess use your hands and stuff and really like push into it and then just try to
uh
hold and brace there.
like do a
But
little bit of a mini chest press to get it off, and then you're like, and then you lean into it,
and just
hold kind of
hold.
thing.
Here we
That
see. This is the worst part of this. I'm trying to find a way to like maybe justify using it,
this is how
which
you could use it. Yeah.
which we shouldn't. And you know what? Anyone who goes to a place that's going to have this, it's going to be difficult. Like you're going to have to stand in line with all the other people waiting to use it. Like,
Yeah.
especially if your gym has an older population,
Hmm.
because they seem to love it more than anybody. I don't know why that is.
Well, their spines are all gristled, so it doesn't affect them. Maybe.
Yeah, that process where your spine just becomes so rigid and stiff that you have no pain anymore.
Yeah. Exactly.
So you can just hammer home flexion exercises all
Yeah.
day with no repercussions.
That's right. That's right. But I don't know. You've seen probably people using machines at the gym in ways they're not intended to be used. Like I've seen videos of
Oh,
people doing hip thrusters in like a quad extension machine.
oh, that I've
And
never
things.
seen.
Yeah.
But I
It's, I
can
mean, it's interesting.
picture it to some extent.
Yeah. It's interesting. Um, so, I mean, maybe you could get creative like that and doing something different with, like, maybe you could do a chest press. We just talked about
It just
that.
someone's taking up the chest press machines. You just go over to the weighted ab crunch and
Yeah.
just start pressing with your hand. You could probably do some tricep stuff with it.
Yeah. It would rotate in that way. So maybe.
Yeah, you do like some
Mhm.
like tricep press down, or you could do like a reverse press, like a
Oh, like a
fr-
supinated.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then get a little bit of the bicep action on the way up.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't do any of this. These are bad ideas.
Yeah, don't do that. That does remind me of a quote. Well, okay, so there was. Do you remember Bro Science?
Yes,
And there's a Bro Science video about how every piece of equipment is biceps.
I do remember that video.
So
And he goes to like all the different pieces of equipment and finds a way to like awkwardly contort himself into positions he shouldn't be in, and then he's just like pulling on things like as if it's a bicep curl.
yeah, exactly. But then I don't know what it's from. There's another quote that I remember hearing. Like every exercise, if you do it wrong enough, is a back exercise. I think. I
Oh,
think
that's a
that's the
good
quote.
one.
I think that's the quote.
But that is definitely true. That is a very valid point. You should have saved that for an opening line.
Yeah, it was as soon as I said it, I was thinking that.
That was my first thought. As soon as you said that, I'm like, dude, that would make a great opening line for this. Or
Yeah.
for another torso talk. That would have been the perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like you're hard pressed to get like sit ups or the seated ab. Like, you can use the seated ab crunch in a way that is for your back, but I don't know how you do seated sit ups for your back.
Well, when you said back, I just assumed spine.
Hmm.
Like to me, if you screw
That's
up
fair.
an exercise, any exercise enough, you will load your spine
That's fair.
positively or negatively. That
That's fair.
depends on how poorly you're doing it.
That's fair. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So is everything just spinal training?
I suppose, unless it's like isolation, like true isolation, which is tough to do. I don't
You have
know.
to be very disciplined for that.
Can you do like a seated calf raise wrong enough that it translates upward?
You would hope not. You would have to be so unathletic to make that happen that I would then argue you're almost incredibly athletic for doing something.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that would be like there is some skill in compensation patterns, I think, as well.
Oh, and the better the athlete, the better the compensation pattern.
Yeah. That I mean, yeah, I've heard that. Like strong people are good at hiding imbalances
Yeah.
all the time.
Good athletes are crafty
Hmm.
and they just find ways to change how they're doing things to do it better
Yeah.
in terms of the output, not necessarily better in terms of
Yeah,
continuous
safety,
repetition or health or
efficiency.
injury or
Yeah.
anything like that, but better in terms of the output is higher.
Yeah. Hmm.
So,
So, disclaimer: don't do any of that.
yeah, and never use the weighted ab crunch machine.
Yeah. Don't
Please
try to
don't.
make. Don't. Yeah. Don't use that. Don't try to make things that aren't biceps or back into those things. Keep every exercise as it's intended to be.
This makes sense why those labels are on the machines now on how to
Mhm.
do it. And you're looking like, why do they need these things? Like, of course I wouldn't use it for anything else. But now, a conversation like this, someone
Maybe.
gets thinking, they're like, oh, I can use it in a different way. And that's how someone gets hurt.
Yeah.
So this makes sense now.
I did see an Instagram post like a long time ago about like crazy, just insane. Like, why would you need that label, kind of thing? And there was the only one that I remember from it was like a "do not swallow" notice on a mattress. Like, do not attempt to swallow.
What
Like,
size is, I mean, that doesn't even matter what size the mattress is because it's more than
yeah,
anyone's capable of.
like it can't be real, but like it looked really real. I don't know.
That's got to be fake. Or someone at the mattress factory is just trying to throw people for a loop.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, like obviously you're not going to choke on a mattress, but I could see somebody hurting their jaw and suing the company if they thought they could swallow it and then found out they couldn't.
People,
Yeah.
people.
Hmm. Anyway, back to the seated ab crunch. There was what's the word for it?
The worst piece of exercise equipment ever.
Well, there's that. I was going to say it was a poignant intro quote question because we're talking about exercise equipment today and what's valuable, uh, potentially considerations on how you should arrange things. But yeah, what different pieces can be good for, and I guess yeah, considerations for buying, considerations for arranging is the focus, and then we'll see what we get into.
Yeah, what's kind of out there? What equipment makes sense to maybe use or purchase? If you do purchase it, then what are some considerations in terms of how you should arrange it or set it up with the other things you've purchased?
Mm-hmm.
And in some cases, it's relevant. Maybe in other cases, it's not relevant.
Yeah, I mean, it could apply to a home gym, could apply to a commercial setting,
Yeah.
various things. The first thing, I mean, I think we're going to agree on this. The first thing that I think of is like the basics for sure. You need a rack, a bench, probably. Maybe you don't need a bench. I need a bench, and a platform, or multiples of these if it's a commercial setting.
I mean, I was starting even further back actually with mine and was like, what's the goal or the purpose?
Mm.
Right? Because, I mean, you're talking about the squat rack, the bench, the platform. I mean, if you wanted to have people weight lift in your gym, for sure you need platforms or some sort of rubberized floor, something where you can aggressively drop weights or drop a large amount of weight if someone needs to safely get out of, a snatch or a clean or something like that. But I was thinking about what's the goal or the purpose of the training or the people you're working with. Like maybe you're building a gym for yourself. So then what are the goals? What are the things you're trying to achieve? Maybe you're building a gym or a facility for other people to come. So what sort of clientele or people are you reaching out to? Maybe you train people and you have to think about what's your training philosophy and what equipment or resources align with what you're doing, because I think that to me, is probably going to send you down the first path of what type of equipment should you buy.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That is definitely a better starting point than what I was thinking.
Well, you already had your goal. Like, it
Well, I
makes
mean, I
sense.
guess,
I'm thinking about your coaching context, the people
yeah,
you work with, the clientele that you
that's right.
often interact with. Those pieces of equipment make a ton of sense.
Yeah, I
I
guess
don't know if
there,
I've ever seen a good life with a platform.
I have actually.
Have you?
Yeah, just like there's like one or two in the personal training area sometimes. But yeah, it's, I guess that's right. Like there are going to be personal trainers out there that strictly work with kettlebell stuff, or strictly work with bands, maybe. I don't know, like that just don't do any squatting or anything, barbell loaded, which is perfectly valid. There's going to be, yeah, a lot of people that want to set up a little home gym that all they really need is, a couple of sets of dumbbells or something like that. Perfectly valid. Or like an exercise ball, whatever. Perfectly valid. So yeah, that's a very good point to think about. Yeah, what's the clientele, or what are your goals? What are the movements you want to be able to do, or what are the movements that are important for whatever you're training for? Um,
I just think of the
and
extremes, right? Like you look at something like a Good Life or a box commercial gym,
mm,
and they have all kinds of cardio equipment. They have all kinds of machines. They have all kinds of free weight. They have a very wide variety
yeah,
of things versus if you go to like a CrossFit gym, for example,
mm,
it becomes very specific pieces of equipment that's needed for that versus even somewhere, there's a setting I just kind of thought of now, but like a clinical or a rehab setting,
mhm,
the equipment they use in there, maybe you have one cable stack and maybe
mhm.
you have some other pieces of equipment, especially depending on the setting, because maybe that clinic or that rehab place only needs so much weight, only needs so much load. And then you're sending the person off to somewhere else. So you don't need to have squat racks or other things like that. So there's just so
Oh,
many unique contexts
yeah, that's right.
to consider.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the clinic at UW just had a cable machine, and that was it.
That's actually the place that I was thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, so that's definitely the first thing is, who are you dealing with? What do they need to be capable of? Or if it's just yourself, what are your goals? What do you want? Um, and then from there, like, I think it also matters a lot the amount of people that are going to be there, and obviously the amount of money that you want to be spending on this. If it's just you, then you don't need a wide variety of stuff. If it's going to be a gym setting, you need probably a wider variety than you think. Um, and I was having a conversation with one of my clients recently, he has like the rack and the bench and the plates and the bar. Um, but that's pretty much it for his home gym right now. And he's thinking about adding to it. Um, and so for me, at least, when I think about a home gym, it's, what are the pieces of equipment that you can get the most out of? Um, and what are the different movements and things that you want to be able to do? And what are pieces that can allow you to accomplish a variety of different movements, so that you're not, wasting a lot of space with, one piece of equipment that can be used for one thing. Um, versus in a larger gym, obviously the space that you have is valuable, so you don't want to waste it either, but you maybe have liberty for a couple of pieces that can be used for only one thing, if that thing is valuable to your clientele.
Yeah. And that actually kind of brings me, I'm glad you brought that up because this was one of the other points that I had is once you've maybe thought about the goals of the purpose of what you need to do in in your training space, let's call it, is then what pieces of equipment are actually going to address those goals. And I think one of the ways to look at it, like you mentioned, from sort of a bang for your buck or a versatility component, is what are sort of the unique attributes that each piece of equipment has. And to me, there's some equipment, like off the top of my head, that I can think of that's maybe redundant in a sense of, do you need to outfit a place with whether it's a home gym, whether it's a clinic or whatever, do you need both dumbbells and kettlebells? You can do mostly the same things with them. I would argue the kettlebells are better than the dumbbells because there's some unique things that can be done with the kettlebells that can't be done with the dumbbells, but you can still press them, you can still row them, you can goblet hold them, you can do a whole bunch of other things, right? So do you need both of those pieces of equipment? For example, you probably only need one, versus something like a barbell, again, brings in more unique factors. There are things that you can really only do with a barbell. If you want to do weightlifting, if you want to do powerlifting, things like that, you have to have a bar. So to me, it's then looking at some of the pieces of equipment in the way you said, what sort of flexibility or versatility does it afford me? And does this thing have some unique attributes that make it a must-have or a must-purchase in comparison to, like you said, a piece of equipment or something you can buy that really only has a singular purpose? Because then I feel like you lose the value of it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely, you want to think about what are the things that are absolutely necessary, because they're like, if you think about doing something like powerlifting or weightlifting, you 100% need a bar. You 100% need, for powerlifting at least, you need a rack. Weightlifting, I would strongly urge you to consider getting a rack.
At least a squat stand to throw on your platform,
Exactly.
at the very least.
If you have a bar, you're gonna do plates, bumper plates, metal plates. That's gonna depend maybe. So those things in that context would be absolutely necessary if that's your goal. And then the other pieces are just going to be like, what accessories do you need to be doing? And like, that might depend on your skill level at the time or whatever. But with regards to those accessory movements, are you able to do at least something similar to everything you need to be doing with each piece of equipment? Like in the pack gym, there was, I think, 2 sets of cables, and they had a cable row and they had a cable lap pull down, or 2 lap pull downs.
Yeah, at one point there was 2. I don't know where the second one came from.
But in that kind of a situation, there was a lot of people that were working out there, so you need availability. But in your own personal space, you definitely don't need 2 lap pull downs or 2 cable machines, but 1 cable machine, if it has enough weight on it, you can do a lap pull down, you can do a seated row with those. So that's, I really, really like the idea of a cable machine in a home gym space, because you can do so much with it. Like any machine that you would be missing in a commercial gym, you can mimic, probably like 90% of that movement with a cable machine. So that's a piece that has like a very high versatility in my mind. And
on the flip side, even if you're in a larger place, do you now spend a whole ton of money on these machines, or do you invest just a little bit of extra money on more cables?
Well, that's
and
right.
Economically, you might end up being in a better spot buying X amount of cables rather than a bunch of machines.
Well, that's right. I mean, if you look at any commercial gym, you're going to see somebody at the cables, probably always, at least using one of them. But most of those machines are going to be empty most of the time. And like, it's not to say that they don't have their value. They absolutely do, because, there's more control is necessary with cable machine exercises than with like other fixed exercises. But that's a big time piece that has variability, and it also has those unique features that you were talking about. Is like, if you talk about like loading it, like tying it to your ankle or tying it to your wrist or something like that, you can only really do that with a cable machine.
There's so many options with the cable,
variety of handles, all kinds of different stuff like that. So
it's definitely one of the most versatile pieces of equipment out there. Mm-hmm. And like you said, I think that makes its value very, very high, because almost regardless of what your setting or your situation could be, you can find something from a cable perspective that that fits, right? If you're in a smaller space like a clinic or a rehab setting where maybe you don't have a whole bunch of space, you can get those single tower cables, right? Where it's not necessarily a large machine with two cables, it's just the one tower. There's even cables that you can set up now to squat racks, and you load plates on the other end, and it's a pulley that hangs off either the side of the racking or over the pull-up bar. So if you had a rack at home, you just need to buy one of those.
Yeah. I have seen some of that stuff recently.
I've never used one, so I don't know how well they work, but
Yeah, I don't
how
I don't
bad
know
can it
either.
be?
Yeah, that's right. I don't know either, but I assume it's fine. Like the other thing is you can potentially build some of this stuff. Like I saw an Instagram post, somebody that I followed. First of all, during quarantine, I've seen a lot of people build wooden squat racks.
Yeah.
And some people that have engineering experience build better squat racks than other people. But you can build a solid one out of whatever timber. But I did see someone else post about like $10 at Home Hardware, and you can get everything you need for a plate loaded cable machine. And it just like you get like a wire cable, you get a little pulley thing, and you get something that will hold the weights, and that's it. That's really all you need. And then you can just loop it over the bar.
Yeah, and if you get a second pulley involved, you can then just set the cable up over the one pulley if you want to pull down, or you then loop it under another pulley that's anchored lower if you need to pull up.
Mm-hmm.
So you could potentially make it's not going to be as fancy as the ones that are from like the factory or manufacturer where you can slide the handle up and down, but you could manually move the wire onto a second pulley, and it gives you the option to pull down or pull up.
Mm-hmm.
Which, if you have a cable that can pull up and down, got everything you need.
That's right. But yeah, some way to do that stuff, because any movement can be done with that kind of a setup.
Yeah, I didn't even think about the value of some of the do-it-yourself stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, like if you're a weightlifter or a powerlifter, like you might want blocks for bench press or deadlifts or pulling off of blocks or whatever. You like much more economically efficient to build blocks than to buy blocks, I think. I guess that's really the only thing that I think of is the cable and the blocks, but I'm sure there's other stuff that you can build.
Well, that's what I mean, but at the very least, I think it's good to bring up, because like, do you need to? I was actually on a website the other day. I was looking at some equipment, and like, there's what's it called? Like those bars that are designed to be carried, like have like the handles. I guess they're like the torpedo bars or whatever.
Yeah, that's what we called them at Pack for sure.
Yeah, and I was looking at that. I was like, what a stupid piece of equipment. Like, if I've purchased kettlebells or dumbbells, if you really like dumbbells that much, if you have something like that, you just carry those at your side. But you also could just like, you can find anything to carry, right? In terms of, you take like an old, like, I bet if you filled up those like 20-liter water jugs with sand or something, those would be plenty to carry, and things like that, right? So there's some equipment that, like you said, I think just DIY, just make it yourself, and you can find a way to make that happen. That there's a lot of options out there, I think, if you're creative and you like to build stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I saw one guy, like he ordered plates, but of course everyone's plate orders are getting delayed right now. So early in quarantine, he casted plates out of cement, and like he just got a mold and poured cement into it, and then made 45-pound plates, 25-pound plates, and like, yeah, you literally just need something that weighs an amount that you generally know. Like it doesn't need to be from a gym. Like I do like the torpedoes, I think, are a little bit nicer because you can plate load them, so you have more control over the weight versus having to scoop sand in or out every time. With
Well, you just have to get stronger.
That's
Because
right.
I don't know if you want to be scooping the sand out. So you just start
That's
with less and then work your way up.
that's a good point. That's a good point.
Or you buy containers of different sizes and you just leave them
That's
filled up
that's probably a better idea.
if you have the space.
Yeah, that's probably a better idea. But yeah, I mean, like that's a consideration to make too. Like if you have the money and uh the impracticality of it, like the tediness. I don't know what the word is, but if it the
Like the
tedium,
tedious nature of just
yeah,
like having to do
yeah, of
something
having
over.
to like to move, like to fully pull a bar down, move the J hooks, put the bar back up, reattach the cable thing, string it, load the plates on. Like if all that stuff bothers you a lot, then it's going to be worth spending the money on like an actual cable machine probably, um, or like actual torpedoes if carries are important for you. Um, I do like plate loaded dumbbells as well because they save space and the load is variable, and if you already have plates, then you can get pretty heavy with them.
Well, and that's the upside I think about. It's something that I don't think it's talked a lot about in the training world, right? About like what equipment is worth having, what do you buy? And I mean, yeah, there's a small chapter in the NSCA textbook about creating a weight room layout, but it doesn't really prepare you to build a space. Like if you were going to build a space from scratch. And I think one of the biggest benefits from this conversation is even just determining what's worth having or not. Like it really forces you to sit down and think about what is valuable and what is not, or what is most important and what is not. And we talked a little bit about this would have been way back in one of the first episodes about, what attributes are important to train for your athletes and analyzing a sport and things like that. It really forces you to think these things are very important. These things are not as important. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of things that you can buy that maybe is the plate loaded dumbbell as good as a one piece dumbbell? Probably not. But if you're just using it for accessory stuff, you have to figure out in your hierarchy of what's important and what's not important.
Yeah.
It's probably good enough. Save
Well,
some
that's right.
money, save some space.
That's right. And I mean, for everything outside of the sport, so if we're talking athletics, the sport is not going to be done in your home gym. So don't even worry about it. If we're talking weightlifting, powerlifting, as long as you've got something close to the competition equipment. So like in this conversation with my client, he's a powerlifter. So he wanted to have calibrated plates. I mean, ideally you get the absolute best set of the calibrated plates, which, can cost like $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 for a full set, which is very expensive. But there's much cheaper options that are still used in competitions. And then there's a cheaper option still that is calibrated, but they don't pay the certification to be used in competitions. So they're even cheaper than that. So it's the exact same stuff, just a lot
Not
cheaper,
calibrated. Yeah.
But so you want something that's going to do the job of the equipment that you need so that you can practice your sport if your sport is done in the gym. But outside of that, everything else is just a stimulus.
It's a means to an end, right?
And that's what we say all the time, right? So it's as long as you have, in my opinion, a way to isolate certain movements that you don't get as a part of your sport, then that's good enough. So if you have a means to load some kind of a row, if you have a means to load some kind of a vertical row, like a pull up or a lat pull down, that's great. And then, isolating knee flexion, knee extension, elbow flexion, elbow extension. As long as you have some means to do some of that stuff, lunges, carries, then yeah, I think you're fine. I don't think it matters too much what the specific equipment is.
Yeah, like I said, I think that's something that, is one of probably the most beneficial things about this conversation is even if somebody listened to this whole thing and only took away okay, I have to make a list of what's really important, what's necessary, and what's not necessary. Because more often than not, you're going to find a way to make the things that are on the unnecessary side of the list work in a different way because it's not a necessity to have. And then in the long run, you're going to end up saving some money, saving some time, saving some space. And, you know, and that might be great for the individual, right? If you're buying your own equipment, then, and you're in your house or you're in wherever, you may only have so much space in your garage or in your basement. And so it allows you to be economical from a financial and a space standpoint. But even if you're in a bigger place, like I've thought about this all the time too. Like if I ever had to redesign a weight room at like a university setting and you get X amount of dollars as a budget, well, am I better off to spend more money on, or that amount of money on more of less equipment? Or do you spend it on more? Like, do you get what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, 100%.
if you know that to your training style, hey, barbells, squat racks, platforms are important, then buy more of those things. Don't just buy a whole bunch of other random equipment just for the sake of buying it because you're trying to fill up the budget.
Well,
So that list will even help you, I think, buy what you think you're only like that you're actually going to need.
yeah, 100%. 100%. That's a great, in either situation, that's a great way to think about it. It definitely, like, what is important to you and your training style, but also what is important to you in terms of the people that you're working with. Obviously, their abilities is part of it. So if you're thinking about, like, if I have X number of platforms, I need X number of weight for each platform. If you're dealing with, you know, Olympic hopeful weightlifters, that weight is
Need
going to be
more.
higher. If you're dealing with first and second year university volleyball players, that weight is probably going to be lower. So like things like that. But even just the number of people that you are training in general and the number of people you're training at one time, because maybe like 90% of the stuff that you do is going to be done on a platform. So you want a lot of platforms, but maybe you already have 6 platforms and you're only ever training 12 people at a time. And, people can switch in and out. Maybe you don't need any more platforms because people can share a platform and that's perfectly great. And it would be nice to have a GHR or a chest supported row or another cable machine or something like that. If you have the space and there are things that are less essential, but the stuff that you have is doing the job of the essential stuff, then there's consideration there as well.
Yeah, and exactly. And the only way to get there is to actually have, I guess we'll call it like your needs analysis of your space and your training.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what, like I said, this is what I kind of like most about this conversation is putting that out there, because regardless of your setting, I think that can be beneficial, because then somebody in the scenario like you've described would know, yeah, I really like the platform stuff, but given the numbers, given the people I work with, we actually have enough of that. So then I could use the money on something else that's more of like a luxury or maybe more frivolous,
Mm-hmm.
versus where if you go, oh, we have 5 athletes to a platform every time we have sessions. Well, I should probably just spend more equipment money on the things I'm using all the time.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
So
like it's however you're going to make everyone's job easier. So in that case, yeah, like an extra 1 or 2 platforms will go a long way. If you've got enough, then you don't need an extra platform sitting empty all the time.
exactly. But you can only get there with that needs analysis.
Yeah.
If you don't ever think about it, then you're just going to buy random equipment. And then you might be thinking afterwards, like, oh, I could have spent better money or spent my money better somewhere else on something different.
Is there any piece of equipment, we've done like a pretty solid job talking about like all the strength based stuff, I think. Is there any pieces of equipment, being more of a speed power guy, dealing more with athletes than I have? If we're talking like an athletics gym, not a specific, like it's not a volleyball gym or a football gym or a hockey gym or whatever, it's just athletics. Is there any piece of equipment that you think is like relatively essential that we haven't touched on yet?
Open space.
Very good.
And I think that's probably like if you're in an environment where you're going to train athletes, you've touched a little bit on, what I would call strength athletes, weightlifters, power lifters, strong men. I don't know if that's the appropriate term anymore. I don't know if it's now strong people, if that's what the sport is being called.
We'll say strong people.
Yeah. What sport do you compete in? Strong people.
Nice.
But if you're now dealing with athletes in team-based or evasion-based sports, football, basketball, volleyball, hockey, rugby, lacrosse, open space, I think is your number one friend to help you train these athletes. There's so much you can do with open space. And that was, to me, one of the best things about that space at Waterloo. Sure, a lot of people might have looked at it and gone, there's no squat racks up there. There's no barbells. There's no this. There's no that. I mean, we made the trek up 3 flights of stairs with some trap bars the odd time to, do some of that. But man, having that open space was such a benefit, such a huge, huge advantage over other spaces. And I even think about the weight room now here at the U of A. And when I first got there wasn't a whole lot of open space. And then I think it was the second year that I was here, we rearranged the entire weight room. Like we moved everything, and it was in like one day. It was one of the most miserable things I've ever done. The amount of poundage that was moved in that day was just absurd. But the layout allowed for a lot more open space. So you were able to actually it's in an old basketball, volleyball court. So you have about 30 meters in length. So now you can do some 10 or 15 meter runs. You can do some change of direction things. You can do some jumping. You can do things like that. So I think if you're going to train athletes from team sports, evasion sports, things like that, you need to have a dedicated way or method to creating some open space in the environment. Yeah. I think that's the number one thing.
Yeah, 100% agree. That was, I'm glad that you brought that up. That was something that I had thought about too as we were preparing for this. But it didn't click in my mind as a piece of equipment, but it absolutely is, but 100% you need to be able to do you can't do any plyos. Like it would be nice to have boxes or med balls or, other things like that, but you can't use any of that stuff without empty space.
Exactly.
And like even for strength athletes, like I think carries are a big time thing that would be valuable if you had the time and the space and the equipment to do them with, but you need empty space for that as well.
Yeah. So. And obviously the amount of empty space will vary, right? If you're talking about a gym for primarily strength athletes, and if you're building the space in to do carries, it doesn't need to be as large a space as if you're doing running or jumping or cutting or changing direction. But I think it would be, it's worth like you said, looking at it as a piece of equipment, it's worth the cost. Where if it meant renting or buying a larger space to build your facility, or if it means building a facility or doing your training in warm weather climates, if that's an option, right? Like if you had to pick between setting up shop in Texas or Minnesota, you might as well set up in Texas where the weather's way better and you can be outside all the time, right? Because you don't really realize the value and the premium of that open space until you end up in a place where winter takes away the most cost efficient open space, which is outside for 5 or 6 months of the year.
Yeah, 100%. Even right now, I'm trying to, like, me personally, getting back into more athletic type stuff, and I'm like, jogging in winter is not amazing. Like I went for a run yesterday and there was snow on the sidewalks, which kind of sucked, but you deal with it. But you can't do sprints really in the, like you're just going to slide all over the place.
Can't change direction.
You can't change direction. Can't be doing that stuff. So yeah, big time premium for athletes on that open space. Do you think there's any piece of equipment that is very limited in what you can do with it, but is worth that limitation potentially?
Ooh, that's a very good question.
For it would obviously, if it's limited, it would be for a more specific clientele. But if you're training this group of people, you might want to invest in something like this.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. I mean, I haven't spent enough time with like a singular population to like at least off the top of my head think of something. Although, like I said, that's a really, really great question.
The one that comes to my mind, if I'm talking about powerlifters, obviously I've been very specific with powerlifters for a while. I really like a chest supported row machine or like a high bench. High bench is more variable. What you can do it well, I mean, not really, honestly, but some way to do a horizontal row that has minimal or zero loading on the spine, on the low back anyway.
Yeah,
Um,
like you said, you're supported because you're just lying on a bench. So your
yeah,
spine doesn't have to hold you in place.
exactly. Or like a chest supported row. You've got like a pad against your chest while you're pulling on the row as you're pulling yourself
And yeah.
into the pad. So you're not loading your lower back really at all, which can be crucial for people that are loading their low back all of the time. So yeah, that's the big one where you can do different grips, but other than that, you can't really do anything with it. But I program that a lot because it's a great way to get upper back volume without taxing the other extremities.
Off the top of my head, I think I might be tempted to go with like a sled.
Mm.
I think there's so much that you can do with it.
Mhm.
And again, completely biased because that was one of the few pieces of equipment we had upstairs in the open space at Waterloo.
Mhm.
But forward carries or forward drags, backward drags, lateral drags, you can do a lot of really heavy lower body loading. You can do
Yeah,
heavy rows.
without all the compression as well, which is nice.
Yeah. And so as we're talking about open space being such a valuable thing, if you could do a lot of things with an athlete if you just had open space and a sled.
Hmm. Yeah, you
You
could do a full
could
body workout with the sled.
you can hit a lot of really important things and give them a lot of good training with just that. So I think it would be worth like if again it's maybe not the most limited piece of equipment because it is so versatile, but I think it's only versatile based on your creativity. And so, but to me, I think the sled would 100% be something that's worth getting,
Hmm.
even if it meant spending a little extra money or, you know, having to cross over into the frivolous or the luxury end of what you're doing. I think it's such a valuable tool.
Yeah, especially if you're dealing with athletes, I would agree with that. Definitely a lot you can do with it. It's very I find it's tough. Again, like it depends on your creativity, but there's not a lot of movements that you can load heavy in the frontal plane. And for that reason, doing like lateral drags
It's one of the
or
few.
like a crossover or a side shuffle, like you're not gonna get that stability, strength work
Mhm.
really that much. So yeah, very good.
So that would, like I said, that would be the one off the top of my head.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, do you have some considerations into how to arrange stuff as well? I imagine one of them was leave open space.
Yes. Yeah. So if you can arrange things in whatever way that keeps open space, I don't think it matters where that space is. It could be like on one half of the gym. I've seen a lot of gyms where half of it's open space and then the other half is all the equipment. Um, I think in terms of where the equipment goes, you have some fixed rules in the sense that some pieces might need to be anchored up against a wall or things like that. So you're probably going to have some limitations in terms of what you can do. But if there's one thing I think that's valuable to consider is how do you like to organize your training? If you do a lot of exercises that are isolated on their own, arrangement doesn't really matter. If you're a big fan of creating pairs or triplets, like supersets and things like that, then you have to start thinking about what things do you like to pair together, because you don't want to put one piece of equipment on one side of the room and then the exercise you like to pair it with is on the opposite end of the gym and you're sending someone back and forth the whole time. So that's sort of the thing that I would consider is how do you like to do your training? Do you like to have things very isolated, or do you like to have things kind of clustered or chunked together? Because that I think will influence your arrangement in any way, whether it's like strength movements. Like, do you like to pair a big compound movement with something stability based on a cable, then have the cables close by the squat racks, for example? Or do you like to do some like contrast type stuff where if you have the open space, do you go from a heavy squat or a heavy movement into a dynamic jump or sprint? So then maybe you need to leave that piece of equipment closer to the open space. Again, there's probably unlimited things or combinations you can think of, but I think that's an important consideration. Do you like to keep things isolated or clustered together? Because that'll influence how you arrange things in proximity to one another.
Yeah, that's a great point for sure. I do think, like, obviously the space that you're in will dictate whether or not these different things are possible, but I do think it's nice to obviously, yeah, have those things close together, um, or to have like a nice flow through the gym if you typically program in a specific kind of a way. Um, for me, it would be, like your change rooms are close-ish to the warm-up area, which is close-ish to, the platforms and stuff where you're going to go immediately after your warm-up, which then, maybe it's at the back or maybe it's back towards the front is where you're going to have your dumbbells, kettlebells, cables, machines, because you're going to go warm up, main lifts, accessories in that order, you know. And so as long as there's that kind of a flow and you don't have, your dumbbells are on that side, your kettlebells are on this side, you've got half the machines over here, half the machines over there, you know, platforms and stuff are splitting it like that. It doesn't, like you say, it doesn't make sense to go back and forth. And it's ideal not to limit yourself to, programming like you could, if you've got, your dumbbells are on this side and your quad extension machine is on that side, and you want your person to be doing some dumbbell stuff and some quad extension stuff, it's nice not to have to program them both on the same day. It's nice not to have to program, your hamstring curl with your, kettlebell swings or whatever, because they happen to be together. It's nice to be able to do whatever you want. So having that stuff in the similar area, because it'll be done at a similar time in your workout, makes sense to me.
That's a great point about the flow. Because even if it's individual people, they can follow a flow of what they're doing. Or if you're in a place where you're training groups of people, I'm thinking again in the varsity environment where you have a designated warm-up space, because then a team's coming in to warm up, and then they can move into this area as another team's moving out, and then you have a bit of flow or organization. So that's a really great point in terms of the arrangement of your space.
Yeah, if it's like group training, like you're a personal trainer that does group sessions, or like a commercial gym that does group sessions, or like team training, whatever, you've got your warm-up space for however long you use that for, into the main lift area for half an hour, into the accessory area for half an hour, back to and then to the open space, or maybe your open space first, whatever. So yeah, I think it does make sense to kind of have people in an area and then they're in a different area and then they're in a different area, for that flow kind of reason. The other one that some people might not think about, people that aren't strength sports, I don't think they'll think about it. Having the platforms and the open space separate from each other, I think it's not strictly necessary, but it gives you more freedom, because if you have people that are powerlifting or weightlifting and they're very, very intently focused on the technique and everything, and they're specific. Exactly. You don't want people sprinting in front of you as you're, especially like powerlifters are, in my experience, are a little bit more chill. You're going to have people
Oh,
that are,
weightlifters don't like that one
yeah,
bit. They hate
exactly.
that.
Even if you've got, you know, the, like, even if that's maybe you don't have any open space at your gym. But if you've created a walkway
Yeah.
down the middle, then you maybe want to encourage the platforms to face towards the wall instead of towards the middle, so that you don't have to, like, either you're going to bother the person lifting, or the people that need to go between the opposite ends of the gym are going to have to wait for a second or two for the person to finish their set. So that's something that I think a lot of people wouldn't think about. But
Yeah, the weightlifters hate that.
yeah.
Dude, they do not enjoy if someone walks or jumps or sprints or does whatever in front of their line of vision
Hmm.
as they're preparing to lift. So yeah, that's a niche point. But depending on who you have in the
Yeah,
space,
definitely.
very important to consider.
Yeah, definitely a niche point. But I think regardless, it's probably good practice to have the platforms facing out. Um, and if it's not a commercial gym with a lot of bodybuilders, I would say maybe one mirror in the entire place is good. Um,
I didn't even think about talking about mirrors just because it's like, whatever.
well, I mean, like, if for you, maybe it's whatever. For me, if I see myself lifting, it bothers me like so much.
No, that's what I mean. Like, so to me, I wasn't even thinking about bringing up mirrors because to me, that wasn't even like an option to consider.
Yeah.
Like if someone was like, hey, do you need mirrors for your gym? I would just immediately show them the exit and be
Yeah.
like, you can leave. I don't even
Mhm.
want to speak to you anymore.
Yeah.
So to me, mirrors isn't even an option. So
Well,
I
yeah,
wasn't even
100%.
considering that.
100%. And like, I mean, PAC was the last gym that I trained in that had mirrors, and they didn't have a lot. I always chose the racks that didn't have mirrors. But
And if you got stuck with a rack with a mirror, you turn the other way.
yeah, you face out, but then you see people walking by you all the time, right? So you want the option to look at the wall and not look at yourself. So
People do like to look at themselves.
that's right.
So again, depending on who you're working with.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, those are the key considerations for me anyway. Maybe it's niche, but like I said, I don't think athletes would care that much about it. But there are populations that do care a lot about it. So
I mean, one thing some people might care a lot about in a training space is the music.
100% they will.
I care about the music in the training space when I'm lifting.
Yeah, I think you're definitely not alone. I've definitely seen a lot of people get very excited or very upset about the
I can
music
avoid
choice.
getting upset, I think, but I get very excited if there's stuff on that I like. I get very excited.
Mm-hmm.
Like it helps bring me to another level for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what have you been listening to this week?
I found a new thrash metal band to listen to.
That's cool.
So I was pretty stoked about that.
I imagine that doesn't happen very often these days.
No, it's a little harder. Like I don't know. It depends on how much this happened by chance. It was just a song that came on. I'm like, oh, I like this. And then I looked at the artist. I'm like, oh, this Lich King, never even heard of them. I tried searching them up to find out more about them. Turns out I think that character is from World of Warcraft because when I searched their name, I couldn't even find the band. I just got all these things about World of Warcraft. I'm like, okay, let me be more refined with my search and put in musical band. But yeah, they're pretty good. So I've been listening to a lot of their stuff, and I might have pronounced that wrong. I don't know if it's Lich King or whatever, but they're thrashy, so I'm down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I guess I don't know how much press they're getting on this one, but I'm sure they'll appreciate the shout out if they're so niche, potentially.
I don't. I think they're relatively popular in the sense that, like, I think there was one song that I found on YouTube, and it had like 300,000 views. So that's not like unpopular.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
But maybe I'm just late to the party. Who knows? But it
Very
works.
good. Very good. Nice. The
Still crushing the sea shanties.
I have been I've still been listening to sea shanties. I still really enjoy the Longest Johns. I've still been listening to a lot of K-pop, but I'm gonna spare the audience on that. Actually, the big thing that I'll plug is Spotify. I'm late to the party on Spotify, but I've been
Have you just
using
heard
it.
of Spotify?
No, I've heard of it when it first became a thing, but I've just recently started using it consistently. My phone changed music apps a while ago, so I just all the music I have on my phone doesn't really exist to me anymore. So I've been using Spotify, and I put up with the ads because I don't want to pay for stuff, but it's nice because I discover things now. I hear
That's
about
the best part.
Yeah, so like I might not like all this stuff, but I'm gonna have new stuff to say now more often probably. So as I was getting into sea shanties, listening to more of those, one thing came up on the playlist. It was I didn't like it was kind of more like an orchestral, almost
Like a symphony sound.
like a symphony sound, but also like a lot of like harmony, like voice harmony as well, like a big vocal section in like a symphony orchestral kind of a context. But what got me was the context of the song, and it was I don't know if you've seen Lord of the Rings, right? No? Oh
Nope,
my
I haven't
God.
seen any of them.
All right. Well, okay. For the people who are listening that have seen Lord of the Rings, it was a song about the Ents marching towards Isengard. And this means nothing to Tommy, and that's
I have
fine.
no idea. I'm very confused right now.
But anyway, so I was like, who are these guys? That's pretty cool. Because it's not actually a song that's in the Lord of the Rings movies.
But it's
And
about
so
it.
it's about it.
Okay.
And so I started looking into them more, and like their stuff's all really good. It's not like an all the time thing for me, but like here and there it's nice to listen to. And they do a lot of Lord of the Rings, like that world stuff, a lot of fantasy stuff in general, and some like religious inspired stuff. And it's not some of it is like remakes of songs that actually exist in the movies, but most of it is songs that are inspired by poems that Tolkien put in the books, which is kind of cool. So like there are lyrics that Tolkien wrote, I'm sure, but they expand on it. It's much like they're full songs, not just like a few lines of a poem. So yeah, if there's people that are as big of nerds as I am, then check it out because it's pretty cool. The band is called
I was just about to ask you. I was like, I don't know if he actually ever said what the band was.
No, I didn't. The band is called Clamavi de Profundis.
That's very Latin.
Yeah, it is. It's spelt as it sounds.
Okay. That's always good.
Yeah. I don't think there's going to be a lot of things that sound like that, so you'll probably find it if you
I was gonna
search
say, and even if you
musical
mess up
band.
one letter,
Yeah,
it's probably not going to send you the wrong direction.
yeah, and it's a very niche musical genre. So if you find something that's not about fantasy, then it's not that.
So yeah, I people should be able to find it. I would think.
Yeah.
So
But yeah, that was interesting. Anyway, to find that stuff, I thought that was pretty cool.
that's a unique pick. I like that.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, look forward to more unique picks in the future, I suppose.
Braden discovered Spotify.
Ideally,
It's the end of the shows are about to get wild. Here we go.
yeah, that's the big thing. If you haven't heard of Spotify, check Spotify out.
No harm in putting that out there.
That's right. But yeah, that was good. That was a good talk. That was fun. That was fun. Yeah, if you want us to talk about anything or have questions, then hit us up on Instagram. Speed Strength Show, Speed Strength Performance, Braden Southern. Yeah, thanks for coming along, world. That was the Speed Strength Show.
And we'll see you next time.
Peace.